Today, I asked Dr. Bart Ehrman if the Muslims accurately represent Jesus, the historical Jesus. Do they know the historical Jesus correctly? Or is everything that they have about Jesus filtered through the Christian milieu, the Christian idea? So I asked him today because some of the Muslims and ex-Muslims out there have been interviewing Dr. Ehrman recently and trying to say, well, do we have this Jesus right? Muslims think they do compared to Christians, and Christians think they do compared to Muslims. So I figure, let me ask an expert on Jesus and see what he has to say. We are Myth Vision. Welcome back to Myth Vision Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Bart D. Ehrman. All of his credentials are all over the internet, so if you don't know who he is, well, roll out the red carpet, because here he is. Dr. Ehrman, on December 5th, all day, I'm going to be hanging out with you, listening to this webinar on the nativity of Jesus. So we're going to probe deep, and this would have cost someone a couple $100. So they have the opportunity to get a high-caliber scholar like you for $49.95. They can go sign up now. And even if they miss the live, they can always watch it later. So I highly recommend go down in the description. Now let's get into the juicy stuff. Dr. Ehrman, if I may, Muslims believe a certain idea of Jesus. Christians believe a certain idea of Jesus. They both believe in a miraculous virgin birth. They believe in this idea of Jesus is born from a woman, and somehow God intervenes and miraculously makes Mary pregnant. If I'm not mistaken, this is both of them. If I could say, because you're the historical Jesus guy, because we know where Christians are wrong. You and me have talked about this, and we're going to hear more of that come December 5th. But where do Muslims, in their view of Jesus, get things wrong?
I've done a number of interviews recently with Muslim Muslim podcasts, and it's been great fun because Muslims do revere Jesus in many ways. They have views of Jesus that in the Quran that are not. Some are found, some are comparable to what you get in the New Testament, and others are taken up from early Christian legends. And I think most Muslims don't realize that that the stories that you find in the Quran can usually be found outside the Quran earlier in Christian sources, and including, I think the one that most Christians would find problematic is that Muslims do not believe, the Quran says that Jesus didn't really get crucified. He didn't really die. That it was somebody else who got crucified in his place, and so that would be something that I think historically, I think Jesus certainly got crucified. I think this is a historical certainty. There are other stories in the Quran that will actually be, one of which will be reflected in my webinars. It turns out about not about the virgin birth, but about Jesus as a young boy. There's a story in the Quran about Jesus as a boy making a bunch of clay birds that he brings back to life. Not back to life, he brings to life. And this story is taken from the infancy gospel of Thomas, which is an account of Jesus' escapades as a young boy from the ages of 5 to 12. And so that's part of what I'll be discussing in my webinar, is not just the stories of Matthew and Luke about Jesus' birth, but also stories outside the New Testament about his birth and his upbringing, and this one that got picked up in the Quran.
So let me give them some benefit of the doubt, because we're always critical here at Myth Vision, and I want to be nice. And I think one thing I have to value on the Islamic approach to Jesus is they see him as a man. Like, there is something that is like, okay, whatever they want to think about miracles, at least they see him as a man and not God, right? Because now you're getting outside of this whole idea of Jesus being divine. It's kind of more of a realistic view, if that makes sense, in some respects. Would you agree?
Well, yeah. I mean, Jesus is not God in Islam, and certainly more realistic in that. I mean, Jesus was certainly a man, and I think that the early Christians would have agreed that Jesus was a man. And so this would be a point of, and he would agree that the Christians would agree that Jesus was a prophet, which is what the Quran says. And so I think there are places of agreement. But I would also say that that saying that Jesus of Nazareth was a man is a useful commonality between Muslims and Christians is kind of a low bar, right? It's like the only ones who are disagreeing are the mythicists, like and so like, really, that's your standard. That like, if you agree against the mythicists, you're doing pretty well.
So okay, I tried. I literally did. I guess we're gonna have to watch this webinar. I'm telling you, because I feel like we're getting into some things that I really want to save for the lecture. So this is really all I was wanting to know is how right and how wrong are they on trying to get the historical Jesus? I wonder if they've had. Go ahead.
They don't have any access to the historical Jesus. The Quran has no access other than Christian storytellers. And so whatever the Quran has picked up is from earlier Christian traditions or something that it's come up on their own. That's true, though, of the later Gospels of Christianity as well. If you have Gospels from the 4th or 5th century, they are either based on earlier Christian traditions or they're stories that people have made up. And that's what I would say about the Quran as well. So when the Quran says something about Jesus that happens to be historically accurate, like he was a man, it doesn't provide any kind of independent verification of that. They're just basing it on earlier Christian stories. And so, but it's interesting from a history of religion's point of view to see what early Muslims thought about Jesus. And just as it's interesting to see what early Christians said about Jesus. It doesn't mean that they were right or wrong. It just means it's interesting to see what they thought.
So final question in the vein of who Jesus was. Reza Aslan, he's a well-known Muslim, but also he's written a book about the Zealot. I think it's called Zealot, where he's writing about Jesus. And I love learning different ideas and flexing my thinking about could he have been this rebel leader? Could he have been this and that? But do you think that Reza's painting Jesus in the image he would like Jesus to look like, which might look more along the lines of Muhammad? Because Muhammad was kind of a warlord, military prophet. And if Jesus was carrying a sword, he kind of matches the Islamic caricature of Muhammad in the early conquest and such.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point. I don't think I've ever looked at it that way. Reza's book, it was a bestseller. Is the first book ever that I know of about Jesus to be a #1 bestseller on the New York Times bestseller list, and it's written very well, and it's a page turner. I don't think it's at all accurate, and in terms of its overall portrayal of Jesus, and I think that the portrayal of him as a zealot-like figure. He doesn't think he was like officially capital Z zealot, but he was somebody who believed in a military overthrow of the Roman world. That's not a new idea. And a lot of Christian scholars have said that. And so I don't think it's necessarily influenced by his view of Islam, but it would be interesting to pursue. I think Reza was generally trying to do a historical study. This view that Jesus was a revolutionary was the very first view put out by Jesus by somebody who approached the Gospels from a critical point of view in the 1770s. Hermann Samuel Reimarus, in a posthumous published book on Jesus, argued this. And so it was the first critical book of the historical, the first book that Albert Schweitzer talks about in his history of research, The Quest of the Historical Jesus. It was Reimarus, his view that he's a revolutionary. Aslan resuscitates that view, but I don't think, I'm not sure he knew that this was Reimarus. I don't know if he knew this was Reimarus' view or not. So I'm not convinced that it necessarily is because it makes Jesus look more like Muhammad. Because the reason for Jesus being a zealot-like figure for Aslan is because the promised land was given to Jews, and the Jews should have the land. That means they got to take it from the Romans. So it isn't really like, it's not quite the same thing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ehrman. Everybody go right now. Join the webinar. You're going to see me there. I'm going to be helping out probably in the chat. Been talking to Chris. We're going to be trying to make sure that we can have riot control. I hear that there's lots of wars that happen in the comment section as you're chatting.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, I don't read them.
Well, I'm glad you don't, because if you did, we wouldn't be able to get what you're going to be
Yeah,
presenting.
and I don't have time, but while I'm doing it, but still, even so, yeah, I heard it was a little bit rowdy last time, so we'll see what happens. Can't
Myth
please
Vision-
everybody. You can't please most people.
Exactly. That'll be at mythvisionpodcast.com/Christmas. And that's Dr. Bart's webinar. Go sign up now. Thank you so much, Dr. Ehrman.
Thank you. Appreciate it.